Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So I'm back for another Have Your Say video, and today's video is for All Stars 9 episode 6. Today we're going to be recapping the episode, going through the results of the Have Your Say poll, and I'll be talking about a bit of drama to do with Gottmik being accused of stealing her roast jokes from other people. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. So let's start by recapping the episode. So the queens come back in after Roxy last week had to cut someone, and she did that thing on the main stage where she seemed really upset and she said she wasn't looking at where people were standing, and she ended up cutting Gottmik. But she was first of all going to cut Angeria and everyone was really gagged, but then she ended up cutting Gottmik instead. Roxy said that she's really sorry when Gottmik comes back in, and it seems like Gottmik doesn't really believe that Roxy didn't know where anyone was standing, although Roxy insists that she really didn't know where anyone was, although it seems that many of the others don't really believe her. So the queens come back into the workroom the next day, and for the mini challenge they are doing a straw poll where they ask some shady questions and the queens have to vote for which queen is the answer to that question. And I quite liked this challenge. They've done it a few times on Drag Race, but I do think that it's better when they ask slightly shady questions, not so much in this particular one. I think there was only a couple of shady questions, but most of them were kind of nice. Also, was it just me, but they brought out the pit crew and they literally didn't do anything. So I don't know whether maybe there was something that they did that got cut in the episode, or whether the pit crew did just come out and they literally just stood there and pointed and that was literally it. I think out of all of the questions, the one that was probably the shadiest was which queen is most likely to be the Secretary of Delusion, and most people voted for Angeria. And it did seem that Angeria was quite confused by this. I don't know if I necessarily can see why they voted for Angeria. Maybe it's because she felt like she shouldn't have been cut in some of the episodes. I don't know, but that's the only thing I can think of so far. And then for the Secretary of Shade, they also voted for Gottmik, but she also voted for herself, so it seemed like she kind of knew and was self-aware about it. I did kind of wish that maybe they had asked some slightly shadier, harder questions, but it was still a fun mini-challenge. And overall, the winner of the mini-challenge was Gorgeous. They then find out that they are doing a comedy roast this week for the main challenge, and because Gorgeous won the mini challenge, she gets to decide the running order for the roast. So the queens get to work on writing their jokes, and they get to the bit where Gorgeous has to decide the order, and they try and do this thing that they always do on Drag Race where Nina says she doesn't want to be last and Gorgeous puts her last, and it's always difficult to tell if the queens genuinely think like that or whether it's just for camera because it's trying to make it a bit entertaining. Because ultimately, I'm never quite sure if I agree that the running order makes that much difference. I'm sure there is some difference if you're at the beginning and the end, because you either have to open or close. But in general, if you're funny, it doesn't really matter where you are. You're probably going to do well regardless. But let me know in the comments, do you think that the running order actually makes a difference, or do you think it doesn't really matter? And I think it's quite interesting that a few different people such as Plastique and Gorgeous have decided to do characters rather than just them as people in the roast. They then have a guest judge, Ruta Lee, who helps them with Michelle Visage to refine their jokes. And this is always the bit where I think they try and set up a narrative that a certain person isn't going to do well, and then they usually do end up doing well. Okay, so now let's move on to the roast, which was the National Drag Convention roast. Overall, I actually think that all of the queens did well. I don't think that anyone did really badly, but I'll just go through each of them and I'll give a few points and my opinions on each person. I really loved that they had Bob the drag queen come out to do the kind of opening line, and I thought Bob was really funny, and she definitely had quite a few of her expressions like purse first, and she did the let's get this roaster cookin', which was obviously Pheromone on season 9. And I really like it when they bring out Drag Race alumni and do something like this, because I think it's a nice chance to see a queen that we haven't seen for a while. And obviously Bob is very funny, so it was an excellent choice for this. Okay, so first up was Chanel. I really liked Chanel. I thought she definitely came across very confident. You can tell that she does this sort of thing a lot. Her jokes were quite funny, but I felt like sometimes her delivery didn't quite push it to the level that it needed to be, and I think some of the jokes, in my opinion, tiny bit got lost sometimes. But she was still very funny, and it was still a very solid performance. Then we had Georges. I thought it was really smart that Georges did this butch character because that's basically what RuPaul told her to do in previous episodes, because RuPaul said that it'd be funny to see Georges trying to be butch. And we all know by now that if RuPaul tells you something and it's going to make RuPaul laugh, then you should just do it. I really liked Georges. I thought she was very funny. Obviously, she doesn't have the best track record with comedy from her previous season, so I thought this was a very smart choice. And she was actually really funny. I think she had a lot of really funny jokes. She definitely played into this character because she knew it would make everyone laugh as well. So in my opinion, Georges probably should have been in the top 2 this week, but it was still a very solid performance, but I feel like she was maybe a slightly overlooked. Next we had Plastique Tiara. I really liked Plastique. I thought she definitely came across quite confident, and I was a little bit surprised because she was saying that she's not really that comfortable with it. And I think it was a good idea for her to do a character because that allowed her to go outside of her usual personality and do something a bit different, which worked for this roast. Next was Roxy. I liked Roxy. I thought she was very funny. I think one of the funniest bits was when she basically said that RuPaul doesn't remember anyone's names. And RuPaul was laughing, but we all know that it is actually true. And when Roxy had to remind Ru that she was the one that did the hair reveal on season 5, I couldn't tell if RuPaul actually remembered that or whether she was just nodding and playing along with it. Then we had Miss Vanjie. Miss Vanjie kind of surprised me because she really went in with some of her jokes and some of them were just very out there. Like when she said that out of drag Gottmik looked like Jeffrey Dahmer. That bit I nearly spat my drink out at, and you could see that Gottmik was also really confused by that. But it was quite funny, but she definitely was probably the one that went in the hardest. Then we had Angeria. I really liked Angeria. She definitely had a very sassy attitude, and I think that worked really well for the roast. Her timing was also very good, and I think she looked the part and she definitely had the attitude down. I also think that her jokes worked really well for this, and she definitely had the timing to back it up. So for me, she was definitely one of the top 2. Then we had Gottmik. I will say I was expecting Gottmik to maybe be a little bit more confident than she seemed, because she was very confident in her original season in the roast. Also, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but just as a general point, there were definitely a lot of jokes that I noticed from other people's roasts on other shows. So this is something we'll discuss a bit later, but to me, although I thought she was funny, a lot of the jokes did seem like they were quite recycled. Also, her set seemed very short compared to other people. I'm not sure if that was deliberate or whether it was just the editing, but she only seemed to say half of what other people said and then she was already leaving. And then finally we had Nina West. Although I thought Nina was funny, I did expect her maybe to be a bit funnier than she was because she is a comedy queen. But the thing is, we know that Nina is not really a mean queen. She's very nice all the time and that's her thing. But I did think that she might be maybe slightly more biting than she actually was. So although she did a good job, it wasn't actually my favourite this week and I think she probably could have gone in a little bit harder. Okay, so let's move on to the runway for this week, and the category was Atomic Blonde. As usual, I won't give my opinion on the fashion of the runway, but I will say which one was my favourite. So first up was Chanel, and she said that her Atomic Blonde character is kind of like a 1950s Marilyn Monroe meets Mad Max post-apocalyptic. Then we had Georges. She said that her Atomic Blonde look is inspired by Tina Turner, and she also wanted to look like a bad bee space age warrior. Next we had Plastique Tiara. She said that she's post-apocalyptic, half car, half human, a third bunny straight out of a manga comic book. Then we had Roxy Andrews. She said her Atomic Blonde look is very warrior princess in the future with a huge saber-toothed tigers and a big ass booty. Then we had Miss Vanjie, and she said she's giving futuristic Fifth Element Rihanna, and she looks like she's probably got a Glock in her cootie cat. Next we had Angeria, and she said she's giving you some post-apocalyptic couture, and it's the end of the world, but she's still going to be sickening. Then we had Gottmik, and she said when she heard Atomic Blonde, she instantly thought of the sexiest woman alive, and it was the future that she's been through it all and she's battled it out, but she still looks like that. And then finally we had Nina West, and she said the inspiration behind her look is 1950s comic book heroes, also a Super Mario Bros. Aesthetic, and she really wanted to be outside of the box. Overall, I thought this theme was good. I think everyone did a decent job. I think my favourite was probably Gottmik or Plastique Tiara. Gottmik did look great. She always turns it on the runway. It was very simple, but I think it met the brief. And I did think Plastique's outfit was really cool, and it definitely hit the brief and was maybe the most interesting to look at. So we find out that Plastique and Angeria are the top two for this week. They lip sync to Be My Lover by La Bouche, and Angeria wins the lip sync. Okay, so let's move on to the results of the Have Your Say poll. So question 1 was, who was the first funniest in the roast? And with 35.4% was Georges, followed by Plastique Tiara with 29%, and then Angeria with 21.8%. And I do agree, because this is not quite what the result of the actual episode was. And I think Georges did do very well, and so I can see why she's in first place. I personally would have put Angeria above Plastique though, although I do think that they both did well. Question 2 was, who was the second funniest in the roast? And again, we had Georges with 28.5% in first place, followed by Plastique Tiara with 25.2%, and then Angeria with 20.3%. So it's basically the same three people. So clearly those three were the top two overall of the votes. Question 3 was, do you like the roast challenges on Drag Race? And we had 94.9% for yes and only 5.1% for no. And I agree, I do really like the roast challenges. I think they're usually one of the highlights because it is a chance for the queens to be genuinely funny, and it's also a chance for them to decide their own material. I personally prefer this over an acting challenge that's comedy, because at least the queens decided the jokes themselves. And by now we have probably heard every single roast joke that you can think of to do with Michelle's breasts or RuPaul being old, but at the end of the day it's still very funny, and I quite like it when a queen really does do a great roast, and it can be an absolute showstopper. Question 4 was, who had the best runway look? And with 40.8% was Plastique Tiara, followed by Georges with 27.4%, and then Gottmik with 13.3%. And I do agree, I really loved Plastique's because it was something really, really different, and it just looked so cool, and she always turns it on the runway. I also really liked Georges' outfit. I did think that Gottmik's, although it was simple, was maybe just a tiny bit more interesting to me, but I thought both Georges and Gottmik did a great job. Question 5 was, do you agree with the top two? And we had 74.4% for no and 25.6% for yes. So the vast majority of people did not agree with the top two. And I think by looking at the other votes, clearly people thought that Georges should have been in the top two. So I can see that. I also thought that Georges was going to be top two with Angeria. Question 6 was, who won the lip sync in your opinion? And we had 88.7% for Angeria and only 11.3% for Plastique. And I do agree, I think that Angeria did really well. Also, again, Plastique did not seem to know the lyrics, and I don't know if this is maybe because the queens aren't being given enough time, I'm not 100% sure, but Plastique even made a bit of a thing in the lip sync this week, and she pointed at Angeria, and it was very clear that she didn't know the lyrics, but Angeria did. But I agree that Angeria definitely slayed the lip sync. She had the attitude down, it really worked with the song, so it was definitely a very good performance and a very worthy win by Angeria. Question 7 was, who would you cut/snip? And we had 68% for Roxy Andrews, followed by Gottmik with 14.3% and then Nina West with 6.9%. I think that it was a funny storyline for Angeria to cut Roxy. However, it did seem maybe a little bit like a forced drama storyline, but we'll have to see. If it does cause some drama, then that might be something good because it will be interesting for the series. However, strategically, I think I probably would have cut someone like Nina because she's not been cut yet. Gottmik just got cut and Roxy got cut the week before and she's been now cut twice. So I probably would have personally chosen Nina. But I think for a storyline and to create some drama, it is quite good that Angeria cut Roxy. And then the final question, question 8, was who is the front runner so far, or in other words, most likely to win the competition? And with 36.7% we had Roxy Andrews, followed by Plastique Tiara with 25.4% and Gottmik with 25.3%. And I do agree, I think Roxy's doing very well, and I think from the edit she is being shown to be the front runner, although personally I think Gottmik would probably be the second person to maybe be the top front runner, and I think it just really depends on if we have another design challenge, then maybe Gottmik will get a little bit higher again, because at the moment it just seems that it kind of depends on what the challenge is for that week. But overall, I do think that Roxy, Gottmik and Plastique will probably be the three vying it out for the final place to win the season. Okay, so let's move on to the comments for this week. And my Patreon Becky said, "This was a really fun roast, but I'm not sure if the sets seemed really short like Mick's. I'm a bit suspicious that they did an All-Star 7 edit and just cut anything that didn't get a laugh from all the queens. And Mick was the only one that got any sort of negative critique." We'll talk about Gottmik in a little bit, but I do think the roast, I really like them. It was a very short roast, I would say. Some of the sets definitely, like Gottmik's, seemed a lot shorter than some of the others. And I agree that, like All Star 7, it was a very choppy edit, so I'd be interested to know what the reason for that is, or whether it was just because, as they said, maybe they just cut out anything that didn't get a big laugh. My Patreon member Charlie said, "This was undoubtedly one of the best roasts there has been on Drag Race. I was surprised Georgia's wasn't in the top though." I definitely agree. I thought Georgia's was going to be in the top because I thought it was a very smart move for her to do this character, and I thought she was also very funny. This was a good roast. I do think there have definitely been better roasts, but I think overall, if you take every single person, no one did badly, unlike some other seasons where most of the time there's usually at least one person who bombs, whereas this season I think was pretty consistent, but I don't think I maybe got some of the belly laughs that I've had from other roasts, but overall it was still a very high standard. And this theme about Georgia's being robbed also was mentioned by my Patreon Kerry, who said Georgia's was robbed. And this was also mentioned by quite a lot of other comments in the Have Your Say poll. So many people thought that Georgia's has been robbed not just once but twice, and maybe production is really trying to push the crown towards Roxy. My Patreon Emmy made an interesting point and said, "I'm just waiting for the blocking to do something, like it didn't really have any payoff as of now. No one has yet missed out on a badge because of it." And this is true, I hadn't really thought about it, but so far the blocking doesn't really do anything apart from cause a little bit of drama. I don't think that anyone so far has not won a badge because of it, although I might be wrong. But so far it does just seem a little bit arbitrary, but maybe it'll be leading up to something later in the season. And my Patreon Ashley said, "I love the roast challenge, it's really funny," and they loved Gottmik. And someone in the Have Your Say poll said, "All of the videos showing how Gottmik stole all of her jokes, some word for word, some nearly, from Nikki Glaser are insane." And let's talk a little bit more about that now, because there has been a little bit of drama to do with Gottmik specifically. So after the episode came out, people took to social media and they were saying that Gottmik's roast jokes seemed quite familiar. And I will say that I am a big fan of Comedy Central roasts that they do for celebrities, and I've watched pretty much all of them. And I also felt like quite a few of the roast jokes seemed quite familiar. However, there are only so many topics of jokes that you can make, so I did think there was bound to be some overlap. However, people online started saying that Gottmik had stolen almost her entire set of jokes from comedian Nikki Glaser, who has done a lot of the Comedy Central roasts, and she was even a guest judge on Drag Race All Stars 7. But then I noticed that several TikTok accounts, as well as some Twitter accounts, then started posting some clips of Nikki's roast jokes compared to Gottmik, and there do seem to be quite a lot of the jokes that are the same. I couldn't find who originally posted this particular video, but I'll play a part of the video that I found on one of the many accounts that posted about this topic.
I do not want to badmouth you since God already did.
I am not going to stand up here and badmouth you because clearly God already has.
It's just like model, actor, singer, you name it, she's it.
Influencer, dancer, actor, you name it, she's it.
And because of all of these videos on social media, this news then started to spread, and it was even reported on by several news outlets such as Yahoo and Pink News, among others. Gottmik later responded to the drama and tweeted saying, "Wait, do you guys think everyone wrote their jokes? Nikki is my queen, so reworking a few of her jokes was a duh for me, love her." A Twitter user then replied to this and asked if Gottmik was okay because she seemed to look quite sad in this episode, especially during Untucked. And it seems that Gottmik was not in the best place during that point of filming, and Gottmik replied saying, "Definitely was going through it and hit a breaking point and couldn't stop crying. We'll definitely have to get into it a bit on No Gorge." And for anyone who doesn't know, No Gorge is the name of the podcast that Gottmik does with Violet Chachki. However, as of yet, the No Gorge podcast episode for episode 6 has not come out yet. So we'll have to wait and see if Gottmik says any more about this situation and why she was feeling that way, and whether she'll talk any more about the accusations that she stole jokes from Nikki Glaser. But from the sound of it, it sounds like Gottmik is saying that all of the queens get help with the roast jokes and they don't all write it themselves, so there's bound to be some crossover. But from what people were saying online, a lot of people are accusing Gottmik of just copying word for word what Nikki Glaser had said in her roasts. So it will be interesting to hear what Gottmik says about this, because there could be an explanation for this. So there you go, there was the Have Your Say for All Stars 9 episode 6. Do you like the roast challenges on Drag Race? And which of the Drag Race roasts on any season is your favourite? Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to get early access to my videos as well as have your comments featured in my Have Your Say videos, please check out my Patreon and consider supporting me. It goes such a long way to helping support my channel and I really appreciate it. And I'll put a link to my Patreon in the description. I'd also like to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreon members who are amazing and support me every month. Thank you so much for being part of my Patreon. I really appreciate it, and I really do love my Patreon community. You are all legends. If you liked this video, please remember to like and comment on the video to help tell the algorithm that this is a great video, and make sure you hit the subscribe button because it really does make such a big difference to my channel. Thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me again in future videos. Thank you, bye!